Hi, it's Ian from the Postal Hub Podcast.
And Marek from Last Mile Experts.
And we are the Last Mile Prophets. This is the last word on the last mile. Modern Expo invites you to Parcel and Post Expo 2022, taking place in Frankfurt from the 18th to the 20th of October. At this event, they will present the largest pavilion, showing parcel locker solutions, innovative delivery methods, logistics model improvements, and much more. Marek, there's been a lot of buzz over the last 2 years about Second Life. Second Life, we used to call it second hand. It used to be all about people flogging stuff on eBay, as I recall. And prior to that, in Melbourne, they had the trading post. I don't know if you had a similar thing wherever you were at the time, mate. The trading post. Or when I lived in London, Loot.
Oh, yes, I remember Loot.
Who knows what happened to Loot? I think it basically was kept running by all the Australians who were desperate to find somewhere to live. We used to buy it. It didn't come out every day. It used to come out 5 days a week. And that was how you used to find flat in London. Anyway, this is all by the by because all that's gone now. It's all gone online. And there are these marketplaces that are popping up, Marek, specific to this Second Life. Now, do you want to just rattle off a couple of the leaders so that we can sort of get into this discussion?
Hello, Ian. Hello, everyone. I think this is a really cool topic because I think this is going to be a big, big deal, forgive the pun. One of the really important rising stars is Vinted, which comes from, now this is where I'm going to test you because no one would even
No, you asked me the other day and I got it wrong, but I guessed one of its neighbours. I think I said Estonia and the answer is actually Lithuania.
Indeed. So the company started in Lithuania. When I talked to some of my buddies at the big carriers, it turns out that these guys are really important. For one of the biggest carriers in Europe, it was the fastest growing account about 2 years ago. So really, it's a big deal. And although they started, fairly small, as most startups do in Lithuania, they're now one of the biggest players in Europe. And I think they're one of the fastest growing. So you've got Vinted, you've got OLX, which is a Naspa's company. You've got eBay, which honestly, I think needs a little bit of Second Life itself from my perspective.
You're always harsh on eBay, Marek. I don't know whether
but you know what, Ian?
It's your Eurocentric view of eBay. I don't upset eBay sellers because let's just, I talk about marketplaces though. I think there's Wallapop as well is another one.
So we've got Wallapop. I'm in Spain at the moment and I use Wallapop here. Ian, coming back to eBay so that no one gets upset here, my view is eBay had a huge opportunity and they still do, but it's about, progressing with change. The ones that interest me most are the ones that have good last mile capability. And I think Vinted have really done a lot in that space.
Well, they had a big announcement just a couple of months ago, didn't they?
Absolutely. Well, our friends from Blockit are powering their new locker initiative. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting because if you think about it, I'm not aware of anybody else. So I have to say this, neither eBay nor OLX nor Wallapop have got their own capability. And this is the big deal. Actually, Vinted are setting up their own capability in out of home. Now, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to ask myself why it's such a big deal and why out of home,
why is it such a big deal and why is out of home so important to making this work, Marek?
Thank you, Ian. That's just what I wanted you to ask me. Telepathy. It is a big deal because the low value of the items means you need a very efficient method for delivery, number one. Number two, because it's C2C, the pickup is not going to be from a big Amazon type place where you're going to be picking up several thousand items potentially. You're going to have one item. So again, it's not efficient to send a driver or a van out there. So you need a methodology whereby the customer themselves delivers to a point and a customer collects from a point, which means PUDO or locker. Locker is usually even better because it's 24/7 in many cases. And therefore, you get this scenario where very low first mile costs, very low last mile costs, customer centric. You got it.
Sounds like the postal network to me. Actually,
I wish.
But there you go. Well, if you think about it, if you're a C2C seller, you usually start off using, I should say, the post. And you drop off your parcel either at the post office or in a posting box. But in many countries, the posting boxes are only set up for letters. So you have to take it to the post office. So already there's consolidation in the first mile. You're not having to collect it from the consumer, the seller, the Second Life seller from their house, unless of course they're a massive seller, which is a whole other story. I mean, obviously, if you're an eBay seller, you might not be selling just secondhand stuff, Marek. You might be selling your own product, whatever it is, and you might be big enough to get a collection from home. And say, Ian, don't go down that rabbit hole, everybody. Okay, I won't.
But Ian, sorry, I've got to jump in there. That's a good
dear.
point, though. These guys, very often, they start as small C-type sellers, moving to small B-type sellers, and then suddenly become rather big. There's a certain company I know of that started in a garage in Washington State. Can you think?
If you want to start a company, own a garage, I've heard, yes. Well, but just we got to stay with secondhand marketplaces, though, Mark, because otherwise we'll get sidetracked and we'll run out of time. What is different about this, though, is that it is organized. Like a secondhand marketplace is more organized than, for example, advertising in, like you used to advertise in Loot or advertise in the Trading Post or whatever it might be. So there's an organized element to this, which means that a company like Vinted can set up a logistics structure around that, especially if they've been able to, I guess data is key to this. If you've been able to monitor the parcel flows, because you know where the seller is, you know where the buyer is, if you're able to then monitor those networks, you can then create your own logistics network where necessary, right?
Absolutely. And Ian, the best in class ones now have escrow capability. So the money doesn't get transferred to the seller until the buyer has picked up the item and sees it's not a brick in a box or something like that. So, it's really developing fast. The other thing that I find really cool, because this is mega ecological and smart, if by chance Marek lives in the same district as Ian, it doesn't even have to be transported. Ian is the seller. He drops off at a Pudo or locker. Marek is close by, but Ian doesn't particularly want Marek coming around to his house.
No.
So, absolutely. So Marek can go to the Pudo or locker and pick it up. Super, super cool. And so it becomes effectively an exchange point.
Yeah, and we saw Spock. I know I mentioned this before. Spock was doing that with the A1 lockers in Austria. How I came across it was, people might remember this, was when A1 had a little program where this A1 is one of the major telco in Austria, and they were installing parcel lockers in their old phone booths. Do you remember that? Well, they were small lockers, and Marek's going to say the lockers are too small, you can't use them. It's a No, what are you going to say?
No, I was going to say something else, because I actually know that story until the Austrian authorities decided that a locker was less attractive than a telephone box. It's really crazy. So
a telephone box, clearly they'd never been to a telephone booth in, say, London 20 years ago when they'd be used as public toilets or advertising certain unsavoury services. Let's leave it at that. Marek, I want to, in the time we have left, talk about sustainability and things like that. There's been much discussion about changing consumer habits or people not wanting to buy new things, wanting to buy secondhand, talk about how this fits into the concept of circular economy. How does all this fit in with our own discussions in the postal and delivery world about reducing emissions and creating more sustainable logistics and delivery networks?
From my perspective, Ian, it's about as good as it gets, because not only are the items recycled, as it were, or get their second life, it's a very efficient delivery methodology. Because, if you take the extreme example where the locker or Pudo becomes an exchange point and it's proximate, it means that you could get a scenario whereby it's on your way, slip a distance for you to deliver, on my way to pick up. You can't get anything much more ecological than that. But even if it means a delivery, locker and Pudo is far, far more ecologically effective before we have the naysayers coming up here, when the network is dense, proximate, and well managed.
There's a whole discussion around the complexion of out-of-home delivery networks as well, which we're not going to get into today. But I think that part of our role in the delivery world is to provide better information to e-commerce retailers, to marketplaces, whoever it is, about the real environmental impact of delivery choices. So what is going to be the greenest delivery choice for someone? How can they be informed of that at checkout? We may come to a point, Marek, in the near future where there's no need for that because they're all so wonderfully environmental, it makes no difference. But anyway, that's just a thought to end with, because, Marek, we've run out of time. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. Remember, as I always say at the end of this, hit like, subscribe, and the other thing, notifications. And then at the end, even better, at the end of this video, in about 15 seconds, click on one of the videos to watch something else on this channel. Marek Różycki, thanks for being part of the Last Mile Profits today.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody.